Okay, I have a great show for you today. I have Jack Posobiec, who's been on several times to go over what the heck is going on in the United States with the upcoming election, with all things Washington, D.C. Jack, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yes, dude, what can I say? Here in DC, it's just been a complete madhouse. People are trying. It's interesting because what you really have are the grassroots and sort of the online just patriots in this incredible movement that we have that want so much done and that are pressing the advantage every single day. And then you've got these people in DC who, for the most, I'm not gonna say all, but for the most part, are just trying to run out the clock. So they know the holidays are coming. They know Christmas is coming. They took a long Thanksgiving. Now they're trying to just get to Christmas to really do nothing. And we just had people, Republicans, the head of Freedom Caucus came out earlier today as we record this and said, I just don't think we're going to get an impeachment of that Joe Biden. I just don't think that we're going to be able to get there. We're just not going to. I mean, do you? And then Republicans sit back and they wonder why they lose. They wonder why they lose when they say they're not. It seems like they're not even willing to fight. And they'll have these arguments about, well, fairness and fair play. Meanwhile, the Democrats will just create a lie like Russiagate or Ukraine Gate, and then impeach Donald Trump or impeach any Republican president on that false pretext, and then do so all the way through the House, all the way up to the Senate, et cetera, et cetera. No, they knew they didn't have the votes in the Senate when they did that. But you know what? They had the fight anyway. Why? Because it drains you of time, it drains you of resources, it drains you of capital. And oh, by the way, it also has the ability of showing your side that you're willing to put up or shut up. So actions speak louder than words. And what I hear out of the Republicans is a lot of words. I don't hear a lot of actions. I will say kudos, though, of course, to Speaker Johnson, who's someone who I wasn't too sure about. I was a little skeptical of the guy. I think a lot of people were when he first came in. We weren't sure, is this an upgrade? Is it a downgrade? Who is this guy? Some of the statements he was making on Ukraine, I wasn't a huge fan of. Some of the other like systemic racism stuff that he was saying, I wasn't a huge fan of. But he released the J6 tapes, and releasing those J6 tapes that showed unequivocally, and this is something that I've been talking about for a while, by the way, something that I've talked about since the day of January 6th, because yes, and if the FBI wants to chat about that, I'm more than happy to, because yes, I was walking down the street on Constitution Avenue as the first flashbangs went out with Raheem Kassam, and we've talked about this on Steve Bannon's War Room, I think the day of or the day after that happened, and we've been saying it literally, our story unchanged. We haven't changed a single word of this since the day it happened, that crowd was peaceful until the police fired or threw the flashbangs, aka stun grenades, at that crowd. Up until then, sure, were they marching? Were they demonstrating? Were they protesting? Yes, they were. They were on the steps. They were all of those things, right? But they were peaceful, and I saw them, and I saw it with my own two eyes that these people were peaceful right up until the point where that. And I didn't hear any. Look, I've been to BLM riots. I've been in the Baltimore Freddie Gray riots, Antifa stuff all over the country, all over the world, really. And you usually hear some sort of loudspeaker, some sort of announcement. You must disperse. You have this many minutes. We will use non-lethal, et cetera, et cetera. There's this, what we call in the military, this escalation of force. So before you get to the point where non-lethal munitions are being expended, you are then going to start warning people and ratcheting things up until it gets to that point, because that any large crowd, probably you're going to start diminishing their ranks as you're doing that. None of that occurred on January 6th. I think the Capitol Police Force was undermanned. I think they were understaffed. I think they were unprepared in many ways. And I think they resorted to very quickly to broke their own chain of command, broke their own protocols, went directly to the non-lethal munitions. And at that point, obviously, that is when things got ugly, when the police opened fire on the peaceful protesters, not afterwards. And I think that's something that came out in these tapes. And I just like to say that, when it comes to people talking about January 6th or any other event, it's one thing to say, look, I saw this with my own two eyes, but it's another thing to say that I've been saying it for nearly 4 years straight. I've never changed a word. And now that this video has come out and backs up everything that we've said.
Yeah, the police start creating the chaos with the flashbangs, the loud noises. Then there's people pushing the group forward towards the Capitol. We now know that there were these ghost buses that were bringing in FBI agents or people that the FBI had some kind of connection to, and yet Christopher Wray has these magical investigations that he just can't give any kind of details on. But then we find out that people in the FBI are like, hey, uh, there were so many people in the crowd. We just need everyone to raise your hand. We're trying to get a head count of how many people at the FBI were actually in the crowd. I mean, this is gaslighting 101. Tell everybody it's this when you know for a fact it's that.
Well, and Stephen, to be fair, in some cases too, that I'm sure that a lot of the case officers that were working that operation, you've got multiple agencies, multiple organizations. And so, and anyway, to say, not to be fair to Chris Ray, but what I'm saying is to unpack what he's saying. What he's saying is that I think he legitimately doesn't know, because I think there were so many agencies that had assets on the ground that day, whether sources or subsources, right? So you could have tasked subsources who have no idea that the person that they're working with, who could be off-site, who could be some guy in a Facebook chat, who could be some guy on Discord that they've never met before, that guy is in turn an FBI source or an FBI, somebody who's being handled eventually somewhere along the line by an FBI agent, a DHS agent. You could have any number, DEA, for example. You could have ATF, you could have any number of agencies that are working assets in that crowd that ended up showing up that day. And these are, you call it witting or non-witting. So you could have non-witting assets like people who, I think a lot of people have pointed to Ray Epps and said that that's someone who is a perfect example of a guy who could be a non-witting asset. That, when he's saying, I want to go to the Capitol, our enemy is in there, that is our target. Who told you to say that, Ray? Why did you say that? Why did you go? And then when Chris Ray comes out and says, well, he wasn't on our payroll, it's like, it's a very specific statement, very lawyered denial. You say, well, we didn't ask if he was on the payroll. We asked if it's some, and when you use this term, at these events, when they say Fed, someone's a Fed, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that that person themselves is a federal agent or a source. It just means that at some point they're operating on Fed orders, someone tied to the government. So it, we used to say narc back in the day. So the idea being that maybe they don't even realize that they're doing it. I think within that crowd, and I'll just repeat what I said, and I've said for 4 years now, that I saw agitators. I have no idea who these agitators were at the time. I remember early on, a lot of people were suspecting it was Antifa, but then that shifted away. I never said it was Antifa because it just didn't look like Antifa, didn't smell like Antifa. They were people in like ponchos, green ponchos with long goatees and hood up. And I remember people saying, going up to, like a little, middle-aged couple that had come from the Midwest that wanted to protest the election, and that's by all means their God-given right to protest that which is in their view a stolen election. Everyone has a God-given right to do that. And certainly in this country, and by the way, certainly in Washington, D.C., because the protest laws within Washington, D.C., especially the National Mall and Congress, are some of the most liberal in the world, because it was the left that set up all those protest laws within the confines of D.C. because of the Vietnam War and various other protests that were always being led by the left. And so these are some of the most open, we've all seen, right? We've all seen the marches in D.C., et cetera, that go on all the time. And by the way, continue to go on. And nobody gets arrested, or if they do, it's a slap on the wrist, you get like a misdemeanor and it's a, pay a fine or something. That they were telling this couple, go forward. Don't stop here. You came so far. You have to keep going. And they're standing there with their little American flags looking at each other going, what? We're not here to storm the Capitol. We're just here to protest. And they were, certainly within their rights to do so. And I would always say they're within their rights to do so. But they were definitely agitators. And then, of course, we've seen all the videos after since, the people on the balconies, and then scaffold commander, this guy with a megaphone who gets up, and they just repeat it over and over like a metronome. Go in, move forward. And it's the exact same set phrases that I heard on the ground are now being repeated by the guy up in the scaffolding. We've heard it on all these videos. None of these people have ever been identified. The person who first cut the fences has never been identified, which by the way, he wasn't even wearing a mask. FBI certainly has facial recognition. It doesn't even need to be said that the pipe bomber hasn't been identified. And so I think there's so many unanswered questions. And, just to go back to DC and Johnson, I certainly do support that he released this footage because it gives us more clarity on what actually happened that day. And, for those of us that have been saying it was a peaceful crowd until the police opened fire, it's a little bit of vindication.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how the select committee held back the stuff that didn't fit their narrative. Speaking
Look, I've
of,
always said Republicans should have kept that open and just flipped it.
yeah,
Bring in Darren Beatty, Julie Kelly, get some Trump people up there, just flip it around and actually start looking into what was going on January 6th. Because these operations, I don't want to talk to Chris Wray. Give me the mid-level guys, give me the ground guys, give me the people that are actually working in the Washington field office of the FBI. That's who I want to be talking to, because those are the guys that are actually running these ops.
yeah. I read today, Jack, that Hunter Biden has agreed to testify before Congress about his business dealings, but he wants it to be aired publicly. So tell us a little bit more about that, because my first thought was, is this a trick? Is this a trap? Is the Biden crime family really just the Biden lame family? Like, what is really going on?
So it's a trap in a couple of ways. Clearly they've got an ace up their sleeve. Clearly he's been, if he's saying that he's willing to do this, then that means he's been going through, in the military, we would have called it murder boarding, just having mock hearings, mock testimony before you actually go up to the hearing itself. So he's clearly been working at this point with handlers. We know that when he was put into, and at Human Events, we've had reports that when Biden took the White House, that they basically worked with the Secret Service to put Hunter Biden in what they call kind of a freedom cage. And that means no more strip clubs, no more running off to Ukraine and China. Obviously, he's not going to be going to Ukraine right now, I hope. That they made sure that he had to keep his nose clean. So their job is, and of course, we've seen the Secret Service over the years is very familiar with cleaning up for Hunter Biden. Only at this point, what they're doing is actually keeping him under lock and key, basically. So yeah, go out with your friends, go out with the family. You can, go shopping at the bookstore in Nantucket, buying slippers that were not my slippers, by the way. That was not Mike Lindell approved in any way whatsoever. But so the idea that he'd been clean, that he'd been able to do this for a while, I think it clearly shows that they've been prepping it. And look, Hillary Clinton did the exact same thing, did the exact same move during Benghazi. She said, I'm willing to, well, she fought it tooth and nail, but then eventually submitted herself. And I remember this, it was Trey Gowdy, and it was a 12-hour session of her sitting there for 12 hours. I don't recall. And that's exactly what you're going to get if Hunter Biden goes out there. Now, the double-edged sword here is that if Republicans say no, then they're going to look weak. Like I was just saying before, they say, oh, you're not ready to go to Hunter Biden. So if they understand that's what they're going in for, if they understand that's actually the process and prepare for it thusly, they need to go in, because they have to go in with all the facts and all the data and all the details, get the hard drive in there, go through it email by email. Is this your name? Is this your signature? Is this your bank account? And really just go through, and you've got to confront him with his own words and his own deeds. And if they're able to do so, I think it could potentially move the needle. But honestly, I think they've got him prepped so much that he's probably not going to give too much, unless, of course, you do that great defense lawyer cross-examination thing where you can really get him to pop off by just twisting, playing into his ego, going in there and saying, well, we know that it wasn't really you, Hunter. It was your dad was really the one who made all these deals. You were just the guy signing the checks. We know you were out partying. They needed somebody who had a clean name. You didn't actually do all this. Because if you've listened to the hard drive as much as I have and spent as much time in the personal life of Hunter Biden, you realize that this is a very egotistical, very ego-driven individual, someone who's constantly, even when he's with these paid escorts, who, and to forgive the crass analogy, but they always say that, you don't pay him to sleep over, you pay him to leave. So he's got but they don't leave when they're with Hunter. He brings them over, and then either before or after, I'm not sure, he's talking to them, recording it, and saying, my family never gives me any credit. I'm the one who makes all the money around here. I'm the one who makes all the deals. I'm the one who brings in all the funding, and they think it's all theirs, and it's not fair. And they shut me out from the meetings, and they shut me out from the balls and the dinners. And I'm the one who does all this work. So I think that if you're able to actually go in there with the right type of investigator and right type and just the right type of question plan to go to Hunter Biden, that you could potentially, if you're, I'm kind of describing what I've served at Gitmo for a year, and you'd call it an approach down there to a detainee. You'd have to use that type of pride and ego, in this case, pride and ego down approach to get a response out of him.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting to
Peony
see.
down.
From what I read, Representative James Comer said, "No, we're gonna behave by the rules and do this our way."
Yeah. And see, there you go. Like Rosendale was the other day saying, this morning when Rosendale said, "Oh, we're not going to get an impeachment." Yeah, if you go in there and you question him aggressively, you might actually get something out of it. But these guys, no, never.
Yeah. Um, so yesterday it was revealed on CNBC that the Biden administration has been purposely allowing Iran to sell oil all over the world, breaking their own sanction rules because they didn't want the negative press of gas prices being too high. Now, don't get me wrong, I like cheap gas. I believe inflation, a lot of the inflation has come from the gas getting up to
Certainly.
nearly $5 a gallon. But why is Biden working so hard to strengthen the country of Iran?
So what's really interesting about the Biden administration and the Democrats is this is a foreign policy play that they've had towards Iran that dates back to the Obama years. And prior to then, you really had, I would say, consensus within the uniparty or within the DC blob, the State Department, whatever you want to call it, towards Iran, that Iran was basically marked off as an adversary. The U.S. had a pretty strident, I would say, pro-Saudi Arabia policy throughout, certainly through the 80s during the war, and then even throughout the 90s. People are quite familiar with the Bush families, in some cases direct ties through the Houston energy industry to the House of Saud and to the kingdom. And so, the U.S.-Saudi relationship is very strong. That being said, it's in the Obama years we really see this attempt to basically pay off the Iranians. And in some ways, there's this angle of, well, as you say, there's this economic, almost mercantile aspect to it where, oh, well, we want gas prices to be coming down, so we're going to allow this to be going on throughout sanction. But at the same time, there's also this idea that you hear, and it really started during the Obama administration, but you hear it so much today. And when I say the word, you'll laugh, because lately, just in the last couple of weeks, it's been everywhere. But this was a policy of the U.S. government that began under Barack Obama, and that's called decolonization. So decolonization, which of course we hear from Hamas, which receives funding from Iran, which, so it's all tied back, that began under Obama. This was the idea, and he talks about this in Obama's books, that his father was a huge anti-colonialist in Kenya, not to his stated father, let's say that, not to go down that rabbit hole, but this idea that, he wants to continue his father's legacy of removing all the vestiges of Western influence within Africa, within the Middle East. Then you also start to see him. So from his perspective, it's the rolling back of American influence, the rolling back of American power, the rolling back of America's policy throughout the entire world. And in some cases, by the way, I think there are places, from at least a military perspective, where maybe it makes sense for the United States to roll back some things, but that's not what he was doing. What he was doing was going around the world to places like the Hugo Chavez's in Venezuela, to the Castros in Cuba, and then eventually, yes, to the mullahs of Iran, and saying, what can we do to pay you off, to help you rise up and rise out of this oppressive system of colonialism that has kept you down for so many years. And so that's why you sort of had this two-track policy out of the United States, now really out of Foggy Bottom down there for the State Department area, where one side wants to demonize Iran, one side wants to put the sanctions on, and clearly that's the side that's kind of got the the upper hand right now. But then you also have this other track of people, and they're all throughout the White House, by the way. The White House is full of those like 20 somethings with their Starbucks cups and their Free Palestine shirts, et cetera, saying that, oh, we've got to improve relations with Iran. And this is, of course, all what I'm referring to, of course, is where the Iran nuclear deal came from. So the genesis of all of that, all of this milieu that I'm talking about in Foggy Bottom, this decolonization, far left idea, applying it to US policy, that we should help Iran rise out of their system of colonialism, which they've been oppressed under for all these years, by giving them the ability to have a nuclear reactor, by unfreezing, of course, the assets, which we know that Biden has continued through his administration. So in many ways, we really are living through, certainly in terms of foreign policy, economic policy, I guess you could debate, but certainly in terms of foreign policy, we really are living through the third term of the Obama administration. And so to understand the Biden White House's Iran policy, you really have to look to the groundwork that was laid during those Obama years. And that, of course, ties into everyone's favorite names, Valerie Jarrett, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, who's, his daughter is involved with the Iranians, et cetera, et cetera. We were, all of the great stories that we remember from the Obama years.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm just trying to connect the dots because the Biden administration, President Biden agrees to give Iran $6 billion. It doesn't end up getting delivered, but during that time, it gives Hamas this courage that, hey, our financial backers are about to walk into a huge amount of money. They attack Israel. Then Biden is like, actually, let's give another $10 billion to Iran. And then we find out today that they've, secretly been letting them sell their oil in order to keep gas prices down so that they can win the next election. I mean, they gave away 100 million barrels of strategic petroleum reserve oil, some of it to China, in order to lower gas prices right before the midterm. Are they just they're just trying to manipulate the American people by strengthening enemies?
Well, unfortunately, I actually think I'll put my political strategist hat on for a second here, that to say that, from a foreign policy perspective, it's obviously completely insane, but from a political perspective, it's probably not that bad of a move. Because honestly, I think it's the kind of thing that people do vote on. And we just saw a Polish government, a right-wing government, that was completely toppled over inflation, over being far close to Zelensky, and then also for cutting off of Russian gas to Poland, which then in turn rose the gas prices. Well, of course, from their perspective, it's, hey, we're being anti-Russia. We thought you wanted to be anti-Russia. Poland, of course, no friend of Russia, due to some ancient and also some very recent history with Russia. But at the same time, it didn't matter when it came to election time, because at election time, if the gas prices are high, it will always be the party in power that suffers. Because as you say, and as you rightly say, it is high gas prices that, because of the price of fuel, the price of energy going into that's the input that goes into every single product, whether it's retail, whether it's shipping, whether it's trucking, that the produce that's on our shelves, it all goes back to the price of gas. And so politically, it's very, very cynical. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but it's probably something that that people won't even look into. They'll just say, hey, gas prices are low, things are going pretty well.
Yeah.
And I'm not as much as a dirty in the tank, conservative, I'll just admit it. It's true. That kind of stuff actually does work over a vast swath of the population.
Yeah. Well, I also read this morning that 25% of Democrats only vote in the election to keep abortion available.
Oh, that's 100% right. So
25% only vote for one part of the economy.
That Democrat wing that you're talking about there, the pro-abortion wing, this is because the Democrats have just a complete lock on the demographic group that supports Democrats the most, or that produces the most Democrat support currently in the United States, is unmarried childless women. So unmarried childless women, which by the way is a growing demographic, and you'll see, in many other demographics, you see sort of like 55-45, 50-50, 48-48, and some undecided, that kind of thing. You see people fighting it out. whether it's, support for one candidate or another. Zoomers, even, by the way, you're starting to see more of a conservative push, shift there. I'll say shift. I wouldn't say that Zoomers are becoming more conservative, but you certainly are seeing a shift, more so than my own generation of millennials. And with the single unmarried women, and even more so with unmarried child, it's 60%, it's 70%. It's this enormous number, because what you've done is you've created a sort of class of person, a class of voter, whereby and this is something that I say to conservatives all the time and Republicans, that when you talk about the abortion issue to that group, they don't, when I say abortion takes a human life and abortion is killing a baby, et cetera, they don't care, because they're not thinking about the baby. They're not thinking about the child. The way they framed it is, if you don't support this, you don't support women's rights. You don't support the right of women to make choices for themselves. And as I said before, it doesn't apply to everybody, but at least for this specific demographic, they've shown it to be a major vote getter for them. And by the way, it converts it with the universal ballots. We were talking a little bit before we came out, these mail-in ballots. What they've done is created a system whereby, in using ballot harvesting, using early balloting, using vote from home, et cetera, that they've created basically an abortion ballot harvesting machine that they've rolled out. And look at it across the country. We have not seen any of the constitutional abortion bans that have gone up on the states since the fall of Roe v. Wade, since that decision. They've all gone the other way. And we're talking states like Kansas. We're talking states like the Midwest, states like Ohio just lost one, Michigan just lost one. And in these cases, you're actually seeing abortion enshrined in the state constitutions of these states. Why is that? That's because you're looking at an extremely advanced turnout operation tied in with these ballot systems that were all created and concocted, by the way, before COVID-19. Right? Remember that, because HR 1 existed before COVID-19. And then when COVID came out, they saw the opportunity. Rahm Emanuel never let good opportunity go to waste. They saw the opportunity to roll in all their universal ballot programs, all their Dropbox programs, and they put everything on there and they got all of it. That's how you're seeing this. So you're seeing a marriage, this sort of like unholy marriage between TikTok, ballot harvesting, and abortion that is producing these really, I have to say, very strong electoral turnouts from that one demographic group that I mentioned. And I've not seen anything. I do this every single day. I work with some of the top people in the party and in the movement. I have not seen anything from the Republicans that matches this. And Republicans really are asleep at the wheel when it comes to it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then you have billionaires like Mark Zuckerberg, who personally spent more on the election than the United States of America spent on the election. And most of that money went to one party. I'll let you guess which party that was.
Well, I think it's great. Instead of donating to candidates anymore, our American oligarchs just straight up steal the election itself. It's kind of, at least we have clarity now that that's how bad things are in the country.
Yeah, I was reading just yesterday that Google, through algorithm manipulation that only like very intelligent data scientists can detect, they can sway almost 30 million votes to whichever party they want. And people don't realize all they have to do is keep showing you the same story that they want you to see until it agitates you into having an opinion in the direction they want. That's how easily human beings are manipulated. And these data scientists are coming out saying, yeah, they were doing it for Hillary. Mark Zuckerberg was doing it where, oh, we forgot to remind Republicans to go vote. But every single Democrat on Facebook got a reminder, go vote today. Today's voting day. So, we're up against these billionaires and these control oligarchs that, want to control our lives. What are we supposed to do?
Well, personally, I tell you what, I take it as a badge of honor, because what that says to me is that what we've been able to do from 2016 on forward, using just tweets and memes, no budgets, no, no Svengali's working the algorithm for us. In any case, you've got the algorithm working against us. In 2020, I find myself, years later, find out that I was actually censored by the United States government under this CISA program. I was one of the top 20, whatever you call it, people that were on this list to be censored just because of the high impact and the volume of information that we were able to do, again, with no budget whatsoever, with putting out the Hunter Biden laptop for receiving this information. So it took all of their billions of dollars. It took Mark Zuckerberg. It took the state legislatures changing the election rules in the middle of the election itself. It took all of that just to beat what this movement has been doing from just people at home telling the truth. And that's really all that it is. Because if it wasn't the truth, you would not need hundreds of millions of dollars to spend against it, which, by the way, even take the politics out of it. Have you noticed that Google is just awful now in general? Just not even like politics, that compare Google now to like 10 years ago, 2013 Google, right? 2013 Google, I put 2 or 3 terms in, boom, I'm getting everything. I'm getting exactly what I want. I'm getting it. It's on my top, my top tier, or maybe at least within the top 3 hits. You're looking for a specific video. YouTube is even worse. YouTube is a wasteland now. YouTube, you can only find something like the top tier of anything when you search for YouTube, but go try to find an old video on YouTube. Go find some video of George. I was trying to look up the other day. The video, and it's, I'm sure you remember it, when George W. Bush, during the financial crisis of 2008, famously said, we need to abandon free market principles in order to save the free market. You remember him saying that, right? I could not find that video on YouTube. I searched like a day and a half. I sent my producers to go look for it. Gone. We found it in someone had re-uploaded it somewhere else. And this was on CNN. This was a CNN interview that had been done. It was very famous. It was widely reported. Gone. Just completely gone. And then once you hit, because YouTube introduced that, and I wear the irony that we're on YouTube right now. But they introduced that sort of bar, right? So you get your search results, and then you get your suggested results once you go past that bar when you search on YouTube now. So you only have like a couple of chances to get it right before they just start feeding you stuff from the algorithm. And in many cases, it really is just the algorithm. But then, of course, to your point, are people in there shifting the algorithm? Are they nudging the algorithm? So they call it in the UK nudge teams. Are they manipulating the algorithm to their way? And so this started with SEO, right? So this started with Google going around saying, well, if you want to pay for us to make your search become first, then we're going to make that first. And it started with that, and that's when they started. So you start with this great invention, this incredible invention that can cross-reference blogs and link backs on the internet to give you the most powerful search tool ever existed. I would say that Google and YouTube had that a decade ago. And at that point, that is when they started altering it. And when they started altering it by adding in, it started with SEO, and that gave them the ability to realize that, okay, well, it's not so bad if we alter the algorithm a little bit, because, we're making money, we need to keep the lights on, et cetera, server farm space, all that good stuff. So then you start doing it, then it becomes easy. But then the next generation of employees comes in and says, well, they've been altering the algorithm all along. And if they're going to alter it for money, wouldn't it be better? Remember, this is the progressive ideology. Wouldn't it be better for us to alter the algorithm to save the world, to stop the rise of the next Hitler, to stop the next Hitler from taking power in the Western Hemisphere? And this, of course, is what they think they're doing, when they know exactly that they are going in and changing the search results so that you can't find anything. I think it's impossible to look up politics on YouTube, Google, Wikipedia, certainly Wikipedia. X has been great. With Elon, everything that he's done there has been great. But it's still, there's so many people still that I think are just locked into, using Google because it's the easy button.
Yeah. There's at least 8 million people that have come into the country since Joe Biden was sworn in as president. Today, DHS head Alejandro Mayorkas laughingly said, there's actually 12 million illegals working here, and they're great. He's showing the fact that he's purposely letting people into the country that we don't know who they are, He's obviously, not in control of the border. But this was the one that really raised my alarms this morning. Is Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said, protecting our southern border is a threat to world democracy and plays right into the hands of Vladimir Putin of Russia and Xi Jinping of China. What the hell is this guy talking about? How does keeping America safe affect world democracy? How is the United States protecting its borders playing right into the hands of Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping of China? This guy makes no sense. He's the most powerful person in the Senate, and he sounds like a complete imbecile.
Look, you've got a situation where, again, these people, they're totally, the term that I use, they're totally gassed. And they're totally gassed, and gassed basically means like you're so gaslit by your leaders and your information bubble and your information ecosystem, where you've got people like MSNBC and CNN. They're just lying to you constantly about the state of affairs, about the state of our world, about the state of crime, about the inflation, et cetera, et cetera. So you're totally gassed. And you will then have people who take that speech that you just defined, they'll clip it up, they'll add in laugh tracks, they'll add in applause, they'll clip out the parts that are bad for their side. This is, by the way, the same thing they'll do if Hunter Biden actually goes up to the hearing, and they'll make their side look great, and they'll leave out all the other context, they'll leave out all the other information so that it goes to their people, and they will say, wow, look at how great we are. Look at how great Joe Biden is. Look at how great the country is. And even though those people are coming in, you know what? They're just it's the Ezra Lazarus, they're the teeming masses. They're yearning to be free. That's all that is. They just want to escape to freedom. By the way, I'll give Republicans credit on this one, because Republicans at least have stopped saying that crap, because it's like, guys, it's not the 1980s anymore. We tried this. It's obviously been an abject failure. These people are clearly, in many cases, economic migrants. They were coming here to send remittances back to Guatemala, to El Salvador, to Ecuador, to maybe not El Salvador under Bukele anymore, but many of these places. You've also got transnational gangs like MS-13, Miss Salvatrucha. Then you've even got, and then certainly you've got child trafficking gangs that are using these children and women, hundreds, a day, raped and assaulted coming across the border, because it's completely the wild, wild west down there. And so the idea that that it's good or helpful for our country in any way is a complete farce, and it always has been. If this were any other country, that would be described as a form of hybrid warfare. And I actually do define it as a form of hybrid warfare against the United States, which, and to the guy's point, okay, this helps China and Russia. Have you looked at China and Russia's border policies? Do you think that something that 8 million people could come across the border of China? No, absolutely not. Not even a question. And you see this, by the way, down on the border between Burma and China all the time, that they have a huge border issue when it comes to not just migrants, but also you have a lot of guerrilla fighters, rebel groups, the whole Mekong Delta situation that goes on. And if any of them are making trouble for China, you know what they do? They go in and kill all of them, and then they shut it down so people stop crossing the border. That's what China does. When Russia has problems on their border, when it's Chechnya or something, they go in and glass the place. So no, it is not like China and Russia. In fact, we are the opposite of what China and Russia would do.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it sounds like Chuck Schumer has played into the hands of Russia and China and just doesn't give a damn about who's coming into the country, even though
Well,
his own
because
state is being overrun. The
the
city that he
elites, and
represents.
this, when it comes to any communist elite, right? In any communist or totalitarian system, they never face the brunt of it. They never face the attacks. It's not going to be their kids that are getting stabbed outside of a kindergarten, like just happened in Ireland. And then the prime minister of Ireland comes out and says, "Oh, we don't tie this to migration. That has nothing to do with what happened." Let me give you a statistic. All right, I pulled this statistic out. I was on the back of my napkin this morning after the gym, and I worked out that actually it turns out that the percentage of attacks that are and the percentage of violence, migrant violence, that can be prevented by sending them back is actually 100%. You can actually prevent 100% of migrant violence if you don't let them in the first place. It's a very interesting statistic. We'll see if I get fact checked on it.
Yeah, it's like Wayne Gretzky. You miss 100% of the shots you
Yeah.
never take. They
Yep.
avoid 100% of the crime they're never here to commit.
It's
Like,
very simple. It's
yeah,
very, very simple. And and when people talk about President Trump's statements on it, I think he's been vindicated. I think he's been proven, at the time to be exactly right. Because when they say, oh, he's, say, talking about rape and talking about sexual assault, yeah, guess what? That's exactly what goes on down at the border. And you may not like the fact that he's bringing it up, but that doesn't mean that it's not happening.
yeah. Well, Jack Posobiec, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a great conversation. If people want to follow you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, the best way, of course, always humanevents.com. We've got our daily show up there. It's 2 p.m. Eastern every single day on the Real America's Voice Network. We're putting out op-eds, news all the time. Humanevents.com is the place you want to go. We're bringing human events back.
Okay, great. I'll make sure to put that in the link down below. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
God bless you too.